batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Ready to move out.
Before we start, I'd like to say something. There's no reason why you shouldn't have complete confidence in your chances to come out of this thing alive in one piece.
From coast to coast, from border to border, from one end to the other, and all points in between. The Classic Guitar Rock Podcast is on.
Yes! That's awesome!
We crank up and break down the great guitar-driven rock of the 70s and 80s, and you are invited to come along.
We got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes, it's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it.
And now your hosts, Jeremy and Jeff.
1/2 teaspoon for fast, effective relief.
It's time for the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast. Hello and welcome back to the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast. This is episode 4, and your hosts, Jeremy and Jeff, are here. I'm Jeremy, and he's Jeff.
Hello. How's it going, everybody?
I was working solo the last 2 episodes. Jeff was not feeling too good. Are you doing better now?
I'm doing better. Yes, thank you.
It's probably
thankfully not COVID.
Probably just age-related. You think so? Right?
I think so. Well, that or kid.
Yeah, kid-related.
Whatever. Residual from children.
When you got kids, they bring everything home. You know, that's the problem.
They do. They're still going to like some kind of after school. It's not after school, obviously, but that same group is taking kids and help them to do their online thing.
That's exactly
so
what.
They're not, they're not at home doing the online thing.
My one son, just this week, in fact, my wife works for the school, so it kind of helps that she can kind of, do some things behind the scenes. But he goes into the school and does, because it was just not working for him being at home. It's been tough.
No, it's so hard.
Hopefully we get through this. I'm perfectly comfortable to hide down in my basement, so I don't have a problem with that. But for our kids, that's a little tougher. So hopefully we
Indeed.
get through this quick. Well, this is a week since before we started this, Jeff. I've been looking forward to this because I don't know what it is about 1980, but when you look at the various years, and this is how nerdy I am, I'll just go Google, albums from a certain year, and you look through, and there are some really good years, but 1980, for someone who's into classic rock, the early classic metal, the stuff we like, 1980 was a really good year.
It seemed to be.
Yeah.
Indeed.
A really good year. And I think, kind of like you mentioned in the first episode, when we talk about classic rock, so much of it is a nostalgia. It's a personal nostalgia thing. And for me, I think I'm a few years older. For me, 1980 was the year where I was really starting to, on my own, find my music and not just the music that was my older siblings played. That I was actually forming my own taste. I was in 7th grade, and I was starting to kind of form my own musical opinions. And so yeah. I can remember a lot of this stuff. Some of the other stuff I love, we talked about ZZ Top, LaGrange. Obviously, you and I were too young to have listened to that when it actually was on the radio. We would have been just babies or little kids. So we've kind of gone backwards and acquired a passion for a lot of this stuff. But beginning in about 79, 80, for me, I remember actually hearing this stuff on the radio, if it was, played on the radio. Some of it was never on the radio, but I actually remember when it came out. And so I feel something about 1980 is really special to me. And there's some great albums, and I'm looking forward to going over those with you today. I think it'll be fun. What about you? How old were you in 1980? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
That's okay. I was 10.
10. Okay. So
just under you.
And
I remember lying in the basement, lying on the couch, and my brother playing 8 tracks. And then we mentioned it 2 weeks ago. So the Friday night video thing.
Yeah.
So that's where I got exposed to a lot of this, and parents would go out for dinner or something, and I'd be home with the brother, and I'd be just staying up too late,
listening to music,
changing the channel on the TV with the dial. And I remember all of these I remember pretty well. If not in 80, then probably 82. 83.
And one thing that's funny too is there's some of these songs that they were just popular. I mean, this is just top 40 what you heard on the radio. Some of it,
Yeah, absolutely.
some of it, not so much. And now going back, you think, man, that was a great time. There was some great music. And I, just as an example, I don't want to give a spoiler, but on one of my lists here, well, I'll just spoil this one album right now. One of my honorable mentions, it didn't make my top 10, but one of my honorable mentions was Pat Benatar.
Hey, I had that too.
Did you really? Awesome.
Yeah.
So Pat Benatar, and you know, that was just top 40 music. Okay.
Absolutely.
But when you go back and listen to those Pat Benatar albums, and this is just an example, we could pick other ones. You could talk about Blondie, right? You could talk about a lot of these albums. They were just really good. And that was top 40. And I know I sound like your parents when I say this. When I say your parents, I mean the collective, our parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
Music today is just not the same. I'm sorry.
No.
You know, and I was thinking about this yesterday, and they don't have an album that coincided, but like the Cars, for example, the Cars, who were all over the radio, that was great rock,
great bands,
music that
great guitar player.
Oh, just never played a bad note in his life, you know. And we were fortunate enough to hear that stuff. And in 1980 was just a really good year. It was a really good year. So really looking forward to this. So thank you, Jeff, for getting better and coming back. I don't think people want to just hear me ramble on. So I'm glad to have Jeff back. And thank you all for listening. We've gotten off to a really good start, and we appreciate it. Even gotten some emails. You can always email us. In fact, I'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear from you at classicguitarrock@mail.com. If you have any recommendations, suggestions, requests, complaints, insults, hate mail, remember the hate mail goes to Jeff. But anything along those lines, email us. We're on Twitter now. I didn't even tell you this, Jeff. We're now, as of yesterday, we're on Twitter. So we're cool. We're a big deal. We're up to 40 followers at this at press. Okay, so we're up to 40 followers. So find Classic Guitar Rock on Twitter and follow us. Send us mean tweets. And I'm
going to be 41 right now.
All right, nice. Okay, he's going there. Woo! Okay, and I'll follow you back too. I'll follow you back. Okay.
I don't do too much, you know.
I don't either. You know, in fact, I had by the way, there's a Classic Guitar Rock YouTube channel. And a long time ago when I started that, I started a Twitter account at that point too. But that's literally 6 years ago. I hadn't done a thing. I couldn't remember my login, so I just started a new one. So there might be an old, you know, collector's item version of the Classic Guitar Rock Twitter somewhere. I should look it up and follow it, see what it says.
Yeah.
Did you find it?
I did. I followed.
All right. So Jeff is the nice. Okay, perfect. That makes me feel good. Were we at 40 or 39? Where were we at? I might have exaggerated.
Classic Guitar Rock.
Does it say how many?
It says 414 followers.
Oh, that's my old one.
Oh, same icon or logo.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So there's two of them. I need to follow
what's
that one. Look, try Classic Guitar Rock podcast. See if that maybe shows up different.
Maybe you can merge, you know.
I'll look into that, because then I'd have 10 times as many followers, 10 times power, unlimited power. Okay. All right, good. So,
all right.
But yeah, thank you so much for everyone checking out the podcast. And so far, everything I've heard has been positive. So I appreciate that. But we're okay with the negative. We're okay. Yeah. We're big boys. We can handle that. So, but thank you so much. But when we come back, Jeff, we're putting you on the spot first. When we come back, Jeff is going to share his top 10 album releases of 1980.
Definitely.
Welcome back to the Classic Guitar Rock podcast. You can email us at classicguitarrock@mail.com. Jeremy and Jeff with you. Jeff, my brother's name is Jeff, by the way. I didn't tell you that.
Hey,
so he
must be a good guy.
He's a great guy. It's really weird. He's older. So growing up, it's always been Jeff and Jeremy. And so I guess it's my ego that makes me want to say Jeremy and Jeff first, but it's super awkward for me to say Jeremy and Jeff. So you'll probably hear me say Jeff and Jeremy because all my whole life it's always been Jeff and Jeremy. It was always Jeff first. So anyways, all right. I got lots of issues, Jeff. Okay, now we're going to start with
I'm here for
Jeff.
everybody.
And Jeff is going to give us his countdown. Now, here's what I'm going to do. You can do the same if you want. I am I'm making some predictions. And Jeff and I we're getting to know each other. So it's not like we talk a lot. It's not like we've been friends for a long time. So I'm basing this just on the few conversations we've had. I'm making a guess. I'm putting a star next to it on my list because I'm assuming we'll have some shared things on ours. I'm putting a star next to what I think will be your number one pick. Okay. And so you can do the same if you want on mine.
I'm thinking
so,
you're going to have the same as well.
It might, I don't know. I think.
Or one of two.
Okay. Well, we'll see. Okay. So let me then, now that you say that, I'm going to guess your number two also. Okay. So I'm going to say, this is your one. This is your two. And I'll see if we're right. So Jeff, the floor is yours. Give us your top 10 albums of 1980. And you can give us why. Tell us why on these albums too. So
yeah,
the floor is yours.
Okay. Thanks, Jeremy. It's good to be back. I'm going to start with 10, right? We're going to go down. All of these bands, we had no female representation. Wow. So for number 10, well, at least on my 10, number 10, I chose Heart, Baby Lestrange.
Good album.
And it's just a great, I haven't really heard it in a long time. Maybe I've heard Down on Me, maybe somewhere. Yeah. But you listen to that album, it's just killer.
Is Even It Up on that album? Does that have Even It Up on it? I can't.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah. Even It Up.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's Ann Wilson, kind of like channeling Janice a bit.
Oh, phenomenal.
And just great production. It's just a great album.
Yeah.
And that was her 5th studio album.
And here's something, a tangent. This will be the first of many tangents. But here's the thing about Heart. They obviously, Ann and Nancy, tremendously talented. Ann Wilson, probably my favorite female vocalist. Top 2 for sure, right? But their band was just tight. Super tight. I think that was Rod Fisher. I can't remember everyone in the band. Denny Carmasi was a drummer for them for a while, but this Howard Leese. But that album, remember the big album that came out in '85, the one just called Heart, that had Alone,
kind of a poppy
album. Yeah, These Dreams. Never. Mm-hmm. That album was on the charts. I started working in radio as that album was on the charts. And that was one of those albums, I'd have to go back and look, but it had, every song on the album, but maybe 2 was on the chart. It was a huge album. And yeah, that was a poppy album, still a really good album. But Baby Lestrange was a really good one. And that, to be honest, I just completely missed that one. That wasn't on my radar at all.
Hey, well, cool.
Good catch.
Great.
Nice.
All right. You want to go? You want me to?
No, you go. Okay, and shut up. I'll shut up and let you go.
Number 9, Michael Schenker Group, self-titled. One of the main reasons is it just brought back that, the nostalgia thing we talked about. We used to just, air guitar and headbang to Armed and Ready.
That's all you need
on that. And, then we got into the Scorpions and UFO a little, so that he has that history there and his brother, the Scorpions. And coming off of your Deep Purple 6 Degrees thing, right?
Yeah.
Cozy Powell and Don Airey played with Michael Schenker.
Yep.
So I thought that was a fun connection.
Those two have played with everyone. Seriously.
Yeah.
Those two have played with almost everyone. Awesome.
And if you don't really know that album, Michael Schenker Group, the solo in Cry for the Nation, it's just awesome.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's like a minute of him doing his thing, and then he does like an overdub, or he's doubling it, maybe some harmony, and it's just the sound. He got it. He's got it. It's great.
And that's the one that starts with the cheesy
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
almost like a steel drum tropical thing, and then all of a sudden there's a bomb.
Yeah.
I love that song.
Mhm.
Oh, great song.
Number 8, distorted bass, Motorhead, Ace of Spades. Just love. I mean, we made fun of Lemmy, but they were a great band. Again, Friday night videos. I remember seeing his face, his mug.
Can I just be completely rude here? Dude,
Yeah.
when you make that much money, wouldn't you have that big mole removed off your face? Wouldn't you?
I think that was part of his thing. Huh?
As part of the charm. Okay.
Number 7, Van Halen, Women and Children First. Loved Van Halen from the beginning, and this was just another one. Incredible rock. Everybody wants you. Everybody wants them. Take Your Whiskey Home.
Yeah,
I remember that one. Good one. 6, Whitesnake, Ready and Willing. If no one knows that one or forgot about that one, it is fantastic. And along the same time frame, they came out with a live album, In the Heart of the City.
Okay, now I just have to say this. I keep interrupting you. I completely forgot. I was thinking Ready and Willing was the following year. I thought the only album they had in 80 was the live album. And I, in my mind, was saying, well, I'm not going to do a live album, but that's a really good call. I think
so. I mean,
yeah.
Should I double check just in case?
No, that's fine. I'm not. I just wasn't thinking that. No, it's fine. However,
David Coverdale's voice.
If we go back and find out that it didn't come out in 1980, you'll have to be terminated, Jeff. Yeah.
It's possible. You start to go down the Google rabbit hole, and your mind.
It's not right sometimes. You can't always trust the internet.
It's true. That's true. Number 5, Dio's first Black Sabbath venture, Heaven and Hell. Number 4, Iron Maiden. Debut album. Pre-Bruce Dickinson. Paul Di'Anno. Yeah. Phantom of the Opera. 7 minutes and 21 seconds with just amazing riffs. And, I don't know if you've heard of Humphreys McGee.
No, I haven't.
They kind of get lumped into the jam band arena a bit, but they're far from that. And they've got songs on there for sure influenced by Iron Maiden, among others. Right. Just those riffs, that like the harmony, the couple solos that go on. And yeah. Number 3, Judas Priest, British Steel. Again, guitar all day in high school, living after midnight, breaking the law. We had a bit of a band going, and we tried to play those songs in the band. Nostalgia for me. Is Grinder on British Steel, or is that on Hellbent for Leather? Do you remember? I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I'm not. I think Grinder is on there, and I only bring that up because that is the very first song I learned to play. I think. Is that right? British Steel, Grinder. It is on there. It is on there. Yes. The very first song I learned to play. Okay. That's a good. That could be something we do. For people who play guitar. Yeah, like what are the top 3 songs you learned to play, or just a top song you learned to play? I love that idea. I'm making a note of that right now. I think mine was Paranoid. Oh, that's a good one too. Yeah. Okay. Number 2. Blizzard of Oz. Okay. All right. For a debut album. I know I got one of my guesses right. And I think I'm going to be right on the next one. We'll see. I mean, Back Black, number 1. Okay. AC/DC. You didn't pick that one. I did. No, I didn't. I no, that's not what from number 1 for me. That's not what I picked for your number 1. I'm actually very surprised, and I must say somewhat disappointed that you did not have the number. No, that's great. So let me, and we'll come back and talk about some of these on mine too. But first, let me say I think about 7 or 8 of ours are the same, just in different orders. But there are some surprises. I'm very surprised. Now, I'm not surprised what you picked for your number 1 at all, but I'm surprised that the one I guessed you would say Blizzard of Oz was number 2. So I got that right, but I was wrong on what I thought would be your number 1.
So,
Oh no, you got me really curious.
I know it's crazy. So when we come
I've
back,
got some good honorable mentions.
Oh, forgot about that. Yeah, let's hear your honorable mentions. Absolutely.
I'll go through them quick. Saxon, Wheels of Steel.
Great one.
Scream Dream, Ted Nugent.
Oh, see, completely missed
Wango
that
Tango.
one. Completely missed that one. How did I miss that one? Okay, all right, great one.
I wouldn't consider Rush classic rock, but we have to mention Permanent Waves.
Okay, see,
Great album, but
I thought that was going to be your number one.
Okay.
Because I consider them classic rock. I personally, and that's what
Yeah.
I knew you were a Rush fan, and so that's what I thought would be your number one. But at least it made your honorable mentions.
I had a Thin Lizzy album on there, Chinatown, which is actually a pretty good album.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm surprised at how many I've missed because I did just off my head, I could come up with 10 albums, but then I did a little digging to see, am I missing something huge? And I realized, I am. But even though like the Ted Nugent I missed, the Heart I missed, and the Thin Lizzy I missed. So I need a new internet. Something's wrong. So, okay.
The new Google.
The new Google. Okay, awesome. So when we come back, we'll look at my list and we can pick that apart. So stand by. All right, welcome back to the Classic Guitar. What's the name of the show? Classic Guitar Rock Podcast. I'm Jeremy. Here
CGR.
CGR. It's the CGR podcast. And Jeff just gave his list, which is a great list, and ours are very close. Very close. The orders are changed a little bit. So here's my, and I want to kind of dig in and talk about some of these albums as especially the ones that we both talked about as we go through them. Okay, my number 10, I have Iron Maiden. Okay, Iron Maiden is my number 10. I really, and I kind of look at Iron Maiden kind of like I look at Van Halen, right? It's almost two different bands, both good. Okay, I like the Paul Di'Anno years. I like the Bruce Dickinson years, but they're different enough that I almost treat them as two different bands. And you don't hear this often, and tell me I'm crazy, but I really kind of hear some punk in the first Iron Maiden album. You know, it's got the riffs, it's got the harmonized stuff, it's got, good guitar playing instead of what most punk stuff was. But there's definitely a kind of a punk energy to that first album that I hear, and kind of in the way that Paul Di'Anno was a punk, right? And you kind of hear some of that. But you mentioned Phantom of the Opera, Running Free. Isn't Running Free on that first one too? Running Free.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Great albums. And of course it was this album that caused my mom great concern when she sees that, she sees this album cover, she sees the Killers album cover, and she's like, oh.
Yeah.
But yeah, great album. Now here's one, I might get some flack for this. And here's the thing, this is subjective, right? That nostalgia we've talked about, our lists, someone could make the case, well, that's not classic rock. But to me, these are all albums that I kind of were just real important to me, that I played a lot, that just were a big part of my life. But for number 9, I have Loverboy, the first Loverboy album.
I had that somewhere on my lists. It just didn't make the
and
top
the thing
10.
is it? Yeah, it's pop. It's pure pop, but it's so good. And Paul Dean doesn't get the respect. He was he's got a real muscular style. And what I mean by that is you can tell he bends the strings a lot. And he was quite a few years older than the other guys too. And so he kind of brought a different vibe, but I just like it. The vocals are great. The background, they're catchy. And I'm a sucker for good pop songs, and I really like that album, and I played it a lot. So I have Loverboy in there.
We still respect you.
Yeah. Okay, good. Okay. All right. It might get worse from here. Number 8, I have Van Halen, Women and Children First. Okay.
Okay.
And what I love about this album, I'm sure you know this, but a lot of people don't know that everyone thinks that 1984 was the first album that Edward played keyboards on. But actually, this is the first album that Edward played keyboards on because And the Cradle Will Rock is a Wurlitzer electric piano through a Marshall Plexi. I mean, that's how he got that sound. It's a piano. Dun, 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 you know. So that's just kind of a neat little aside. This is the first Van Halen album that did not have any covers on it. Okay. The first two, if you think about it, there were several covers on the first two, but it's a really good album. You got And the Cradle Will Rock. Could This Be Magic? That's on this one, right? Isn't it? Yeah. And that's the mellow, goofy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Which I did not know. This features Nicolette Larson on the backup vocals, singing on the vocals. Yeah. Kind of funny. So that's my number 8. Number 7, Def Leppard, On Through the Night. This was their debut album, and this is pre Mutt Lange. So High and Dry, Mutt Lange comes in, and that changed things a lot. But I never really thought about it until I was actually listening to it the other day. This was produced by Tom Allom, who produced a lot of Judas Priest stuff. And you hear it, particularly in a song like Hello America, which is kind of a poppy song, but the guitar sounds, if you listen really close, sounds like it could have come off a Judas Priest album, just the way it sounds. And that's what I love about listening to these albums is you realize, you see these thumbprints of producers on these albums, and you realize, oh, that's a Ted Templeman album. You know, that's a Mutt Lange album. And we'll see that come up on more and more episodes as we talk about more and more albums. But Def Leppard, On Through the Night. That was on my list. Was it really? I mean, potential. Almost. Yeah. That was on the radar. Good. Now I had at number 6, and I think you had this at maybe number 3 or 4, Heaven and Hell. Ronnie Dio's first appearance with Black Sabbath. Again, one of those bands that they're different enough with Ronnie versus with Ozzy that I almost treat them as two different. I don't like to do though. Ozzy's better than Ronnie, or Ronnie's better than Ozzy, or Sammy's better than Dave, or Dave's better. I don't like to do that. So in my mind, it's easier to compartmentalize. They're two great but different bands. Is kind of the way I look at it. Sure. What did I? Oh, number 5, Michael Schenker Group. That's where my Michael Schenker Group came in as number 5. Okay. Yeah, and I just love that album. It's got a lot of tracks, doesn't it? There's a lot of tracks, and 16 or something. Yeah, it's a lot of tracks, and there's the Into the Arena is the instrumental on that one, right? Yeah, Into the Arena. You mentioned Cry for the Nations. I love that song, and you talked about that. So that's one of my all-time favorite solos of his. And Gary Barden has a unique voice. I don't want to say he's a great singer, but he's kind of like Ozzy in that it's you hear it and you automatically know it's him. And I just really like, I really like that album. That's a good album. My number 4 is British Steel, Judas Priest, British Steel. And for the, it's just a good album. Living After Midnight, Breaking the Law. I mentioned I learned Grinder. First song I learned was Grinder. I saved up money and bought a tab book. After I learned Grinder, actually, I went and bought a tab book at the music store of British Steel. And it was pretty cool, because then I went through and I told you I learned the whole British Steel album. I kind of cheated. That's how I learned it. I had this tab book. So I went back and learned learned to play Breaking the Law and everything. I had a good friend of mine who would get, I don't know if it was Guitar Player or probably magazine. Yeah. And when every time he got the new month's subscription, he would call me up. I learned it. Yeah. He's like, oh, this isn't here. That song's in here. And he would start playing it. And I was like, yeah, we could play guitar. Just read tab. I bet you that was Guitar for the Practicing Musician. I bet was the magazine, because when they came out, their Guitar Player and Guitar World had been around for a while. But it wasn't until this Guitar for the Practicing Musician came out where they would their deal was they put a bunch of tabs in. I learned to play Spirit of Radio from Guitar for the Practicing Musician. I learned to play Dust in the Wind. I learned to play lots of D. Randy Rhoads D. I learned to
Randy.
play that from guitar because of the tabs that they'd put in there. Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great memory. That's cool. What am I at? Number 3, I have Back in Black at number 3.
Okay.
And think about this, Jeff. Okay. Bon Scott died, I think, at the end of January of 1980.
Yeah, same year.
Okay. By the middle of April, end of April, within 2 months, they had Brian Johnson on board. And I think this album came out in August.
Unbelievable.
Think about that. So tell me about another band that could lose their lead singer, get a new lead singer, produce an album, and then, oh, by the way, that album becomes the second highest selling rock album ever.
Or second highest ever.
Maybe
right?
highest ever. I know.
Behind Thriller?
It's behind Thriller for rock albums, but as far as hard rock, the for sure the biggest selling album ever. It's like
every song.
It's like 29 times platinum or something, which is like 60, 70 million. It's ridiculous.
It's kind of crazy.
Every song.
And to think to get another singer, another vocalist with that crazy, raspy, scratchy
and here's
kind of style, right? I mean, it's like
fascinating thing, Jeff, is, and I already talked about, the Ozzy versus Dio, the, Sammy versus Dave. You don't hear that with AC/DC so much. Some people, it's not Bon Scott. I mean, Brian's been the guy since 1980. What is that, 40 years? He's been the guy since Bon was in the band, 8 years? Whatever. But my point is, I'll watch a concert with Brian, and he'll sing the Bon stuff, and I don't even notice till afterwards. I go, wait, that's a Bon song. And it doesn't even, because he is so much the voice of AC/DC that when he sings TNT or Highway to Hell, it seems like he's supposed to be the one singing it.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's an amazing thing.
Do you think it's just because of the longevity, the length of time?
I think that's a lot of it. I think that, you think of AC/DC has this signature sound, right? It's the Young Brothers, and there are two voices that work with it, and it's fine, whether it's Brian or Bon. I think that's what it is, and it's just like, then you realize, wait a minute, he's singing TNT, and it sounds right, even though he's not the one that's saying it. So it's the weirdest thing. Plus, I just really like Brian Johnson. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the interview show he does on whatever channel that is. He goes around and interviews people. It's really cool. He's just a cool guy.
No, I think I saw him on Howard Stern, maybe?
Could be, but I saw
recently, and he's definitely a cool guy.
Episode of this show, I think it's on, what's it called, Axis, that Axis channel. I saw a show where he was interviewing Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits, and it was awesome. It's just an interview show, but he's just a very approachable, real, normal guy. Sammy Hagar's that way too. Sammy's got his interview show too, and he's kind of the same way. He can talk to anyone, interview anyone, and it's kind of cool.
And he's friends with Bob Weir from The Dead. Who would think? Yeah,
it's crazy. I know. Okay, my number 2 was the one that should have been your number 1, Jeff. It was Permanent Waves. Yeah, that's my number 2.
I mean, I do appreciate Rush so much. I just, it's that I always think they're
a different. You're
prog, not even prog rock. I don't know how it's more sophisticated to me.
Are you a fan of what I call the bathrobe era? The 2112, the Farewell to Kings, the Hemispheres. Is that your era of Rush, or do you like the later stuff, or which era do you like? I
mean, I'm not as big a fan as you, so okay. I don't know. I guess I got into them with Tom Sawyer days.
Okay, so moving pictures,
yeah.
That's all awesome. There's what I call the bathrobe era.
Why the bathrobe era?
They wore bathrobes. Okay, that's where they were wearing the kimonos.
And, right. Okay.
They were, and a funny story.
1981. So one more year later.
Yeah. So in 80, Moving Pictures was 81, right? So Permanent Waves is the end of the bathrobe era. Okay. So bathrobe era started really like Caress of Steel. So 75, 76, 77. And if you see videos from around even Hemispheres, I think they're still wearing the bathrobes. So one of their, I think it was Uriah Heep, was opening for Rush. And so what they did is they started stapling, they'd they'd staple a set of slippers up in front of, right next to Alex's pedal board and Getty's pedal board. So like bathroom slippers to go with their bathrobes. So they'd go out to play, and like the roadies had nailed down these bathroom slippers next to each of their pedal boards. I thought that was hilarious.
Right at home.
It's awesome. But Permanent Waves is the album where they really made a break from the long, epic, Cygnus X1 and 2112 and Xanadu and all those long, epic pieces. They had one, that Natural Science song is pretty long, but everything else pretty short, pretty radio friendly. Some Rush fans didn't like it at first, but over time it's really held up, and it's a really good album, and I love it. That's my number 2 album for 1980. My number 1 is Blizzard of Oz. I think in terms of impact and influence and the sheer number of times I listened to it, that would have to be my number 1. I played the crap out of that record.
Do you think in your world was that more popular than Back in Black at that time anyway?
In my world, yes. Okay, now at the
I think
time,
probably in my world too. Probably because we all wanted to be Randy Rhoads.
Exactly.
Yeah,
now I think if you look back now, looking backwards, you got to say Back in Black obviously was the bigger album. But for me personally, that album, the Blizzard of Oz, was a huge album. I mean, it was. I can remember my 9th and 10th grade. I mean, I literally would listen to that whole album every day. Probably for a 2-year period, I probably listened to that whole album every day. And that was crazy. Diary of a Madman, which followed, was a great one too. But for me, it was Blizzard of Oz. That was just a huge album. Here's my honorable mentions.
Oh, yes.
I have Pat Benatar, Crimes of Passion, as one of mine. So there's my female representation there. Pat Benatar, one of my favorite singers, again, with a phenomenal band. Her band, Neil Girardo, her husband, he's the guy that played for Rick Springfield, Jesse's Girl. I mean, that's him.
Right.
But that album and even the In the Heat of the Night album before this are just really good. And the guitar playing is just super tasty, and the drums they're just great. Great album. So I have Pat Benatar, Crimes of Passion. Also, Scorpions' Animal Magnetism is an honorable mention.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good album.
That was in my also potential.
Yeah, that's a good one. Here's one, U2 Boy. This is one I went backwards for because in 1980 I was not aware of U2. But later in 83 and 84, when I started hearing them on MTV and the Under the Blood Red Sky, that all came out. I went back and got War and October and Boy and all these albums, and this is a good album, and that's why it's an honorable mention for me. But that's my list.
It's a good list.
Yeah, good.
And there was other great albums too, which I was oscillating on as far as like soft rock versus classic rock.
I have a few of those that I did not include, and so I'd be interested to hear some of the near misses.
The Eagles, The Long Run, which had in the City.
Yeah.
Right. Remember the Warriors? Remember that movie? That's the name. It had those shoes with the throat. With the voice box, on the guitar talk box.
Yeah.
Joe
That
Walsh.
is a great album. Sad Cafe, I Can't Tell You Why. They had ran the gamut on that album. That's why it was such a great album. There was the hard rock tunes and the ballads, and that's a really good album. And again, I didn't even see that. That wasn't even on my radar.
Not you. Any other?
Here's one that I kind of felt bad for not mentioning it somewhere, but I couldn't fit that many, Queen's The Game.
Yeah.
Pretty good album. Is it their best? Probably not their best, but again, that was a pretty big album. How about Journey Departure?
I had that one.
Another good album.
Soft rock.
Yeah, but
But Neil Sean,
Yeah, it's good. And what else? Is there anything else?
The Stones had Emotional Rescue, which is it wasn't a fantastic album, but it was a good album.
And really what we're talking about is We just ran out of space. And that's the problem with 1980, right? Is there are so many good albums that came out that year, but we had to draw the line somewhere. You mentioned Saxon, which I should have mentioned Saxon too, at least as an honorable mention, because they're an important band too.
I don't really know what happened to them. I should have done a little more research on them, but I don't know if they just kind of faded away or what.
They're still around. They still put out albums. They have jillions of albums, but
unbelievable.
Well, and that's the thing. I kind of talked about it in the last episode is most of these classic bands, they've got their old fans because they don't get airplay anywhere. No one plays them, sadly. And so they've got to kind of reach out and tap into the market and be creative. They're still, Whitesnake is still putting out albums, So yeah, it's tough. Oh, and you're Ready and Willing, the Whitesnake Ready and Willing. That's a great album. And I completely spaced that. So we had the advantage, again, we'll sound like old people when we say this. We had the advantage of coming of age musically in a really good time. I mean, there was a lot of great music, and 79, 80, 81, 82, 83. I mean, there's tons of great music that's coming out around that time frame. And obviously we're partial to that, but there really was a lot of good music that people look back at now and call classics, and that sort of thing.
I think before I started looking into this, I think the 80s, I'm thinking, hair metal, that kind of glammy kind of thing, because MTV. And I was like, but really, like you said, there was a lot. I mean, there was Bob Seger and Bruce Springsteen were blowing up then. Yeah. If we were to broaden a little bit, Bruce Springsteen, The River, if you want to get, some people might consider that classic. Again, it's these floating definitions, right? But some huge albums all around that year. I forgot I had on here, CCR released a live album. Really? That was recorded in 1970, was released in 80, called The Concert. Really? And I believe it was released with misinformation about where it was recorded. Wow. It was recorded in Oakland, California. But I love CCR. So I do too. And I saw them. Here's my brush with fame. Ready? So in 95, I was working at the oldies station here in Spokane, Oldies 101.1. And I don't know if you remember Creedence Clearwater Revisited. Do you remember when they did that? I kind of do. It was CCR without John Fogerty is what it was. So they brought in this guy who, interestingly enough, looked exactly like Brian Johnson and wore a hat like Brian Johnson, but he sang just like John Fogerty. And guess who the guitar player was in Creedence Clearwater Revisited? It was Elliot Easton of the Cars. What? It was the coolest thing ever. So I go to Sandpoint, Idaho. I'm working at the oldies station, and they say, Jeremy, do you want to go up and MC the concert in Sandpoint? Sandpoint's up the road about an hour and a half from Spokane, a little town. And Creedence Clearwater Revisited was playing there. And I'm like, absolutely. So I got to meet Stu Clifford, the bass player, and Doug Cosmo, whatever, the drummer. Stu, I can't even remember their names. But Stu and Doug I got to meet. And I met Elliot Easton, who was the guitar player, which was like this, because he was one of my favorites. Yeah. So it was awesome, and they sounded really good. But CCR, we could do a whole episode on CCR. We should, because lot of drama, a lot of history. A lot of brother drama. But I would love to talk about CCR in the future. I think that'd be great. He's one of those, vocalists. Oh, just amazingly unique, right? Like you hear him 1 second, half a second. Yeah, exactly. And it's so funny that he had such a, CCR ended effectively in like 72. And then it wasn't until about 82 or 83. Remember when he resurfaced with The Old Man Is Down the Road, and all of a sudden John Fogerty's back, and it was like, he was huge. Yeah. And he still sounded like John Fogerty, and it was awesome. So yeah, no, they're one of my favorites too. I'd love to talk about them down the road. I'm sure we will. So cool. Yeah. Awesome.
All right. Well, I think
That was fun.
I think it was fun. I think we've done our damage for the day. Jeff, I appreciate you coming, and we appreciate everyone listening. And by now, you'll be happy to know that we're on Anchor, we're on Spotify, we're on iTunes, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on iHeartRadio. We're basically on all the major platforms. That happened quick. Last time I started a podcast, it took a lot longer. So you can find us just about anywhere. So make sure you listen, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe and you share. And you can always email us at classicguitarrock@mail.com. And we'll see you on the next episode. Take care. See you, Jeff.
Keep rocking. Have a good one.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast. Please like, subscribe, and share. You can email us at classicguitarrock@mail.com. We'll see you for the next episode of the Classic Guitar Rock Podcast.